Welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Stu and Blake.
Hello and welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. We have a very special guest for you today. We have Veronica Hardy. How are you doing?
I am all good. Happy to speak to you guys so early in the morning.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Wonderful.
Now the internet has gone.
Oh, really?
Oh, mine.
No, I think that might be Blake's.
That was mine though.
Oh.
Wow,
Oh.
it says it's just come up saying your internet connection is unstable. So that's
Wow.
great. So
What
wow,
a start to a podcast.
what a
I'm loving
start
this.
to the podcast. Do we just try again? Do we start again?
No, let's leave it in
we
there.
carry-
Let's keep
carry
rolling.
it on.
Let's keep
I have
rolling.
no idea what's just happened for the last 3 or 4 seconds. You could have broke some amazing news, and I have no idea what's going on. So
No, I just
yeah,
look confused. Don't worry.
Oh, it was
Well,
nothing major. Veronica just confirmed she's fighting Conor McGregor. And it's going to be...
I knew I'd miss all the big announcements. That's what it is. Damn it.
Well, look, rather than go back to the start of the podcast, there's a tenuous link coming here. Let's go back to the start of Veronica's career. And Veronica, if you can tell us, just we always like to start the podcast with. It's like, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what it was like growing up, and how you come to find yourself involved in martial arts.
Well, I was born in Venezuela. I moved there with my family when I moved from Venezuela to America, to Florida with my family when I was 5 years old. And yeah, I mean, that part was a bit tough because it's like you're going to a new country. You don't speak the language. You don't speak anything. You know, like none of my family spoke the language. And it was just like trying to find your way within a world that didn't make any sense to you because it was just so different to anything. So I just remember, you know, like we were in this really small apartment. I have 3 sisters. We were all sharing like a room. And then, you know, I started to go to school. I was struggling at the time because of the language barrier. But, you know, I worked really hard in order to learn English and kind of like move on. And then we moved to another place. Sorry, 1 second. How do I end this?
Don't end this meeting.
No,
Please
I'm
don't
trying
end this
to
one.
end the phone call that's coming through. Usually I have it on like flight mode, so but then it wouldn't work for us. Actually, just 1 second.
To be fair, I've been having technical difficulties as well. I realised my mic wasn't on properly. So this is a fantastic start for us.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
Now Veronica has frozen. This has been one of the worst starts to an episode we've done.
I'm so sorry. I thought it was just gonna take
back.
away the phone call.
Oh my
What's
God,
great is we've done a
no,
whole, basically, like the whole back catalogue now of blooper reels has been contained in the first 2 minutes of this one episode.
Should we just
Incredible.
start again?
couldn't be more perfect.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
so you moved to Florida and you had was it 3 sisters and you were in a smaller flat or
Yeah,
apartment
we're
together in Florida.
we were 3 sisters, so I was the middle one. And then I remember like I just started watching like Bruce Lee movies came up and I just started watching it and I was like, wow, that is awesome. You imagine, you know, like go in a room and you can just like, you know, you kind of like stand up for what you want and you're not scared. And even if people are like, I felt a little bit, well, I've never thought of it this way, but now that I do, I'm like, I felt a little bit like of a connection. Like, yeah, I'm like a foreign person kind of in this place that I just, you know, I just want to do what's right and be there. And people like messing me all the time. And I just want to be able to like defend myself and be in a room and not feel so scared. So then I was like, oh, I didn't know anything about MMA or anything like that. I was like, I need to start doing karate because that was, you know, what was around. And I told my parents, I was like, oh, I need to go. I need to start. And they were like, no, it's okay. It's okay. So I was like, no, I need to do it. And I got so persistent. I started to like hit sofas around, like trying to kick them. Like I got in the wall and I started to like try and punch. And the thing is, we're living in America. So in America, you punch a wall, you're gonna like break a hole through it. It's not the same as like in the UK where it's like proper solid. So we were at, and my parents were like, you know what, fine. I saw this flyer that was in this like little community center, not too far from our house. And I saw this flyer and I was like, you have to take me, please take me. So we went, and I was like the smallest person there, and everybody was a lot more skilled than me, obviously. But I was very persistent. And I remember going home one day, and I told my dad, I was like, oh, these girls are better than me. And then he's like, well, all you have to do is show up every day, don't miss a class, and sooner or later you're going to be better than them. And I was like, okay, no problem. So I showed up every day. I was early, and it just became this love and this realization that there was like this whole world to be discovered with martial arts, this whole entire thing. And it helped my grades. I didn't have bad grades, but I didn't have great grades to being like very, very good student, like a super good student. And then, it taught me so much about how to act like a person and what I thought my morals were, and everything that, like, I really owe that to martial arts, that kind of peace within myself and in life. And then I started.
Can you find a more specific link between, like, because I think that's a wonderful thing that you've said, that can you find a specific link between doing martial arts and how your academic side improved so much? Is it discipline? Is it focus? Like, what do you think that was, that link?
I think it was a little bit of both, because like in the grading school I would get like C's. I would struggle. I was actually like an ESOL kid, which it's like if you don't speak the language. So kids at school were like, yeah, you're like below us. You're not even in the regular classes. And I went from that to being an honor roll student and like skipping grades. I got held back to then skipping 2. And in class wise, I was still in the same grade, but class wise, I was taking advanced classes, and it was just this ability that it taught me to be persistent, right? If I didn't get something right immediately, I wasn't like, oh, whatever. I knew that I had to study to make kind of like a plan, like a structure within my life. It's not like I went from this to this time, I'm gonna, study or do this, but all of it felt more structured, and I felt a lot more respect for my teachers, right? Because I saw them as my senseis. They weren't this annoying teacher that gave me homework and made me do all these things. I'm like, no, these are people that are teaching me life and teaching me things to evolve. And I gave them the respect that they deserve. To be honest, they do deserve that, deserve all that respect. And I felt that way, and I kind of wanted to make them proud as well, because I realized that, if I worked hard, I made my coaches proud, and I could do the same at school. And it was that discipline, that dedication to something that helped me out a lot, and the structure, the not feeling lost. So I was spending time doing the things that needed to be done instead of spending time in my own head, kind of feeling sorry for myself, if that makes sense.
It's fascinating to hear that your academia really sort of excelled, off the back of training. In regards to the sort of training aspect of it, the dedication is obviously there. But did you feel that it came not easy? But did you feel that you was doing something that you had a flair for? When you see the people in the gym that they get it quick, and it seems to, it seems like they've got a flair for it. Was that you, or did you have to really, really sort of apply yourself for it to come to you?
I'm sure like some people, I had these conversations very often, right? Like, because then I started to go to different martial arts and do different things. So they would, like, for example, when I started Taekwondo or when I started Kung Fu or Jiu-Jitsu, they were like, is this your first time? And I would say, yes, I've done other things, but those other things helped me with my coordination, and they helped me with all type of different skills that would then pass on to this other skill. So it wasn't like it was my first time per se, but because these other aspects trained me in a different way, it helped me pick something up. So I consider myself to be a very fast learner, but I feel I'm a very fast learner because I've broaden the spectrum a lot when it comes to martial arts and my body. So I did a bit of gymnastics. I did so many different things that I kind of had a better control of my body. So when I went to learn other things, it was a bit easier because I had more control of myself. And it wasn't like my limbs were just doing something. I'm like, what are you doing? I had a little bit of control. So I feel that helped. And then I started to make correlations between things like, okay, this is a little bit different from like Muay Thai and Taekwondo kicks. Like you're still doing a kick, but one of them you open up and you open up your hips a bit more, and it's a bit more about power, and the other one's a bit more about speed. So it's about finding, like, knowing different. It's like knowing different colors and then seeing how you can blend them. So it gave me more freedom when it came to applying my own style to it.
Yeah, I did a lot of tap dance as a kid, so my ankles now are lethal ankles. They're just whoosh, whoosh, from all the tap dancing.
I bet you wake up and it's just like
yeah, I'll just tap down the stairs, tap up the stairs. Yeah, that's just me all the time. But you mentioning like doing this stuff at a young age. I mean, if I'm right in saying this, your first pro fight was at 16?
No, I think I was 8. I don't know, actually. I don't really know my.
Well, look, I'm telling you that the reliable people on Wikipedia, those reliable people that never get anything wrong on Wikipedia, say it's 16. So
no, I think that was like amateur, maybe. No, I think I was 18 already. I'm pretty sure I was 18. I don't remember, to be honest. Everything's been in my life just feels like mushed together. But no,
it still feels quite young. Like, do you feel like you were? Do you feel like you started at a very young age? Obviously, we'll talk about the fact that, you had 3 years off later on, but like, do you reckon that's a young age to start with like pro fights, especially now seeing people coming through that have got, that you think of someone like Mohammed Makayev or even like Jack Shaw that have got these very extensive amateur careers as well. Do you feel like 16 or 18 is very young to start a pro career, or do you think it's just down to the individual?
Well, for me, I didn't turn pro because I thought I was a pro athlete or anything. I ended up turning pro because I had more than 20 something canceled amateur fights. And I'm just like, I want to get, because I had one, and it was such a bizarre experience because I'd never been to an MMA show before. I'd more or less seen it on TV, like when I was 14, 15, I'd more or less saw it. And I've always done martial arts. So I was just like, oh, you just go in there and do all of it together. I didn't really view it as much of a system as it kind of clearly has paved today. So I just remember like walking out and just being like, oh wow, look at this, and being in front and just having like all these like bizarre experiences for me. And it was so crazy. It was so crazy because at the time I had my first amateur fight in England. So I was already in a different country, and everything was crazy to me. And then I had another one, and in that one I got a head kick knockout, and it was awesome. It went like viral. But then after that, I got a lot of just everybody turned down a fight against me because they would just pop it up on YouTube and be like, no, we're not doing that.
yeah, I don't blame them. I'm like, yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, but it was. It kind of sucked, to be honest, because I didn't have the opportunity to have that time to make those mistakes and to learn and to improve myself. I was just thrown straight into the fire because of it. It was just, okay, well, you can't find one here. Maybe if you go pro, you might find a fight. And then it went that. And yeah, then I took them also between my first pro fight and my UFC fight. There was 6 months. 6 months.
Whoa.
Like, I look back and I was just like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had zero idea of anything, and I didn't have a like a house that I lived in. Does that make sense? I was kind of traveling. I was lost. I was just traveling with my dad from one gym to the next, and I didn't really understand. It's not like I went to an MMA gym. It was like, oh, this guy teaches wrestling, so you go here, and this guy teaches boxing. So the only time I kind of was able to put it together was when I was in the cage, and then like find out what the mistakes were. And on top of that, it's hard to find what your mistakes were when you're already dealing with the fact that you're in a cage without being really prepared. And that's what I felt in my last fight. I was just like, what have I been doing this whole time? You know?
That's great. So you had a 5 wins and 1 draw.
Yes.
Before you got to the UFC. And then and that all happened in 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months.
That's so mental.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So you had like a fight a month, 5 wins, 1 draw. Right, I'm a UFC fighter now. That's crazy.
Yeah. And my first UFC event was the one I fought in.
That's so nuts.
It was really crazy because I felt like financially I was never really stable, obviously. And then I'm from Venezuela, and it's not until recently that I was able to get my dual citizenship with Portugal, because my grandparents migrated from Portugal to Venezuela, and by 3rd generation you can get your passport. So I always felt a limited time when I was in places, because it's limited time before your stay is okay. And I would apply for residency, and I would always get denied. So like I lived in England until I got kicked out. Like they waited for me at the airport with my passport. Like, here you go, leave. You know, and England was where I went because I saw Dan. I used to see him when I was younger, and I just like his attitude, and I like that he threw kicks a lot. So I was like, oh, I did a lot of Taekwondo. The way he fights, maybe something like there's a lot that I can learn from him that he can teach me that will apply to me, because it's somebody that I felt had a similar sort of view and style, and the way he talked about martial arts, I felt a lot of a connection to him in that regard. So I was like, if I'm going to have this great Mr. Miyagi type of teacher, it's going to be Dan. And I don't know why, because I saw other fighters and I didn't feel that about anybody else. So when I came to England, and the timeline's crazy. So I moved to America when I was 5, and I left when I was 16. I stayed in Venezuela. I went back to my home country for about 2 months. And then I went to Spain. I lived there for a little bit. And then I went back to Venezuela because my mother was sick. So she went to Venezuela to get treatment. And after that, I traveled for a competition, and it was a Taekwondo competition. And I was just like, this doesn't feel genuine to myself. You know, a lot of the way that the fighting has changed. It's been a lot of, it's about how tall and skinny and how you can like touch somebody. And I want to fight. I want to be like some warrior type thing, and be free to, why have I learned all these martial arts for, you know, if I can only use like one part of it. So I was like, I'm going to do MMA, but I never thought I'm going to be in the UFC. I'm going to do any of this. I mean, like Ronda was just coming up at the time, and I didn't really know, like I knew it because one of my coaches brought it up. He's like, oh, you're going to be like Ronda. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means.
was seeing Ronda at that point inspiring? Obviously being one of the first woman to fight in the UFC, like how important, you know, was it watching somebody like Ronda?
Well, I hadn't quite figured out how to watch the fights yet. So I was told about Ronda, but I hadn't really watched her until a little bit later when I figured all that out. So, I mean, is everything. Like, she changed everything. She she opened up every single door. Like, whether you like her as a person, you can't deny that she has changed so much.
Yeah.
Like, she's allowed women to be in the sport, and something that, you know, was said that's never going to happen. And for, like I said, for me, it was never about doing it as a job. I just felt like I was in this mission of martial arts. I didn't really think about like a career or anything. I just thought my life is doing martial arts, and that was it. That was my big master plan, and somehow it was going to work itself out. And so I didn't think about.
Go on, sorry, you carry on.
Yeah, I didn't think I wanted to have a school or anything. I felt like there was so much to learn that I couldn't stop.
Yeah, but how difficult was that then when your journey is all about martial arts and you're having success early on? how difficult was it? Because once you got to the UFC, and it still blows my mind that you did all of that in 6 months and got into the UFC. But how was it then? Because I think your first 3 UFC fights you lost. How difficult was that mentally? Did you have those moments of imposter syndrome or self-doubt where you were just like, oh, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, that did hit me. It did hit me like that because it was like, what have I been doing? I felt like I don't mean none of this in like some weird narcissistic way. I'm just not like that, you know. But I felt like I was better skilled. I was like, I have more skills. I felt like I had a better spirit. I felt like I was younger and all this thing, and things weren't working. Why are they not working? And then the first time I was just like, the first time I fought, it was like a 2 weeks notice. I was very ill. I was in a hospital when they told me about the fight, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go anyway, you know. And I showed up, and in that one, it didn't hit me that much because it was horrible to lose, absolutely horrible. But in my head, I'm like, you knew that was the dice you were rolling to get into the UFC. You know, like you knew that was a possibility because of how you stepped in there. And then I was scheduled to fight in the O2, and that I felt like that was amazing because I was like, wow, I started MMA per se, you know, my amateur fights in England, and now I'm gonna get to fight in the O2. That's amazing. And 2 weeks before the fight, I tore my ACL.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I ended up watching the fight on my phone, woken up right after surgery. Like it was so heartbreaking. It was like, oh, the stars were aligned. Like that was just, you know, that was just like not too bad. The stars were aligned now, and I was gonna fight in the O2, and it was gonna be so special because I was gonna, first of all, get a visa to go back to England, which would have made everything a lot easier training wise. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen, and it was just one after the other, like of bad things, of surgeries, of injuries, of not being able to stay in a country because of my passport, and I just felt like it's too much. It's too much for me. I can't do this on my own. You know, at the time I didn't have a team. I was going from country to country trying to learn all these things, but I didn't have a team. I felt like everything was just like, I'm not this super, you know, super talented person that can just do it like in the cartoons. And I felt lost. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have anything. And then I lost, and then I felt even worse. And I'm like, oh no, it's just because of this. And then I trained, and it was weird because during the training I would be able to, like, you know, they split it up, and I was able to do like really good things. When other people that were doing really good, I would do so well against them. But then when I stepped in there, there was just this giant disconnect. And yeah, and it was hard because it went from one gym to the next. And then if you go to a gym and you're a UFC fighter, they're just like, I'm gonna mess you up, you know, because everyone's there to like mess you up. So in their mind, they can go like, I beat a UFC fighter when they're going home. And I was just like, dude, good job. You beat the worst UFC fighter. Like I lose all the time.
But how was that to get? Because it seems like you've got over that really well, because you came back after that. You beat Poliana Viana, I think it was, and finished her as well.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that then to get your first win in the UFC? And how was that journey from that third loss to going into the cage for that fourth fight where you're like, well, if I lose this, I'm definitely getting cut. For sure, I'm getting cut if I lose 4 in a row. And then you get a stoppage victory. Like, talk me through that journey from kind of like how that imposter syndrome and how down you are at that point to like, oh my God, I've just finished someone. My UFC career can really start going now.
Yeah. Well, I saw, I was a bit, there was a fight I was really nervous for because I had changed, and it wasn't because I was gonna get cut or anything. I never really thought about that. People brought it up to me a lot, like, "Oh, you lost this fight, you're gonna get cut," and I was just like, I didn't even think I was gonna get in UFC in the first place. You know, I didn't even think that was a possibility for my life. Like, my focus is the person in front of me trying to beat me up, not the getting cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting cut in the fight. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So I had this like one place to the next. So this was part of my schedules before fights. I would train about 6 hours a day, 6-7 hours, and I would be about 6 hours in a car from one gym to the next. So I would get to the gym and I would be doing the workouts, but my mind was just, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was so tired. I was so exhausted, and nothing was sticking together. You know, I had like a Muay Thai coach that I go for Muay Thai, and he was teaching me ground and pound. And I'm just like, no, because, you know, he's like, you're an MMA fighter, so here, I'm going to teach you this ground and pound. And I was like, no, I'm coming to you specifically for Muay Thai. And then you don't want to be disrespectful. And then it was just such a mess. So for that fight, I was in Canada. I was in Vancouver. And it was just after receiving my Portuguese nationality. So now I could travel to Vancouver and go to other places and not have to choose wherever I can. That's a possibility for me to train. And I found Ryan Diaz, who now has a big gym in Vancouver. And the way I trained there was so different because I was training twice a day. I would train for like, I'd wake up, you know, like did a lot of grappling. I'd rest. I did another session. And then sometimes I would do an S&C. Like, this was totally different to what I was used to.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't going like from the boxing guy to the kicking guy to the wrestling guy to this. And I wasn't just in the car, like tired. So I was nervous because of that. I was just like, I haven't trained these many hours, and I look at all the hours I trained and I lost. Imagine now that I've trained less.
Yeah.
But I felt different. I felt healthier. I felt more in tuned. Things like Ryan taught me a lot of like glue things for MMA, if that makes sense. Like how to kind of piece things a little bit more together.
Yeah.
And they had great Muay Thai coaches, and I was able to evolve a lot in MMA and not so much in specific martial arts. So before that fight, I was nervous because the training had changed so much. It wasn't from this draining, chaotic thing to a camp, to an actual MMA camp, with an MMA coach. Yeah, and I went and I was just, I felt like in that camp, I did things a bit more my way, and not my way, like, oh, I don't want to do that running, whatever. But I was able to be more calm in my mind to where I can add like my touch to things and think about moves and think about how to set things up. You know, I just felt like my mind wasn't so clogged with all this just fog. And before it was fog going training to training, and just keep going. I would just tell myself, just keep going. Just wake up. The sooner you start, the sooner you finish. Just keep going. And it was just like, oh, this is how everybody trains. This is why everybody's able to do this. You know, it wasn't my lack of willpower. It's just that I was just running in the wrong direction. So that was great. But then after the fight, I couldn't really go back to Canada because I had to go apply for a residency, and it was just really hard for me to get it. So
yeah.
So then here I am again, lost, lost in the world. And you know, I'd met Dan already at this point, and I thought if I lived in Europe, I might see him a little bit more often. I met Dan like in a more loving type of way. So I went to Holland to train, and I ended up getting a really bad concussion. But in Holland here, I don't have a head coach. I didn't have somebody to tell me about it. So I went again to training, and I had another one. And I realized that I'm like, why do I feel so? I felt like I was getting lazy. I was like, why am I so lazy now? Why is everything so, like, it was so hard to do anything at all. And I would keep trying to show up to training, and I just felt like a zombie. I was like, I just want this to stop. And I didn't understand what was going on, I didn't understand. And I actually had another concussion.
And is that what led up to you being, you were pulled from a fight, were you not, by a Brazilian Athletic Commission? Was that back in 2019? You were actually pulled from a fight because of headaches and stuff like that.
Yes.
Was that what happened there? And then later on in I think 2020 it was, I think maybe just before the pandemic, you fought B. Malecki and then decided to retire after that because of the concussions. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it started there. And the thing is, like, I was scheduled. I'd asked for because I just won in 69 seconds. So I was like, oh, I'm not injured. I'm okay. I'm ready to go. I'm in shape. Let me get another fight. And they're like, no, there's no fight available. The only fight available is if you fight in December at 115 at 52 kilograms. And I'm like, I've never made that weight, man. But I said, okay, it's fine, because I made flyweight pretty comfortably, because that's my natural competition weight. I don't have to boil myself down to nothing in order, just because I can make the weight doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And I accepted it because I really wanted to. And a fight got offered in Brazil, short notice, at 125. And during these concussion things, my weight skyrocketed. I was barely eating anything, but my body, I think because it was fighting off, what was happening, I just started, my weight started to go up. I was really inflamed. So I thought, well, I can make 125 really easy, and let's see how that goes. And then if not, it doesn't look bad if you don't show up to the 115 fight, because I already had the initial 125 fight that I wanted. And in there, I hadn't even started the weight cut, and my head was, I've never have felt pain like that hard in my head. It was crazy. I couldn't step. I couldn't do anything. And my the people around me were really nervous. They were worried, especially because I hadn't started a weight cut. So it wasn't that I was super dehydrated. This was just something else. So they took me to the hospital, and they were doing a bunch of scans. They put an IV on me, and at this point I'm like, if you injected that, how am I supposed to make weight now? It's impossible.
Yeah. Well, quickly, Veronica, was you also sparring at this point?
No. Those happened with wrestling.
Right.
Yeah, it was with wrestling. I mean, the initial time it was with one of the coaches at the time, and he was just really big. And that's sometimes the danger if you don't have somebody your size and you're going with somebody bigger. Something that's a tiny bit explosive for them is kind of catastrophic for you.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, so they were there, and the doctor ended up coming to my room and pulling me out of the fight when I got back to the hotel, and I still didn't get a clear answer of what was going on. I was like, okay, I'm being pulled out of this fight. I'm in this hospital. I've been here for hours, and nobody can tell me what's happening. They're like, you don't have CTE. And in my head, I'm like, how would that even show?
Yes.
What is that? So then I stayed in Brazil, and then it didn't get any better. So I started to see a neurologist, and they gave me a whole bunch of medication. They're like, oh, you should have these injections, but they only have it in Europe. So here are these medications. And they were anti-seizure medications and painkillers, like horse tranquilizing painkillers. And I took all of those, and and very, very, very stupid of me. I started to feel a tiny bit better, and I accepted a fight, but I thought, I'm going to accept it at 135 this time, because if I have the same issues, then I don't have to worry about anything weight cut.
Yeah.
If they continue. And then it was bad. Like, I did about 30 minutes of shadow boxing a day leading up to the following fight, because that's as much as I could do. That's as much as and I'm like, I cried through the 30 minutes of shadow boxing. It wasn't easy. But I felt I felt a little bit trapped because I'm like, dude, you start off and you just lose and you lose and you lose, and then you get something like, you did something good, and now here you are again. You just canceled 2 fights. What are you gonna cancel the third? So I didn't. And I showed up, and I was just like, in the end of the day, I fight, and life's thrown a lot at me, and I fought through it. So I'm gonna fight through this. So obviously the fight didn't go my way. I was so tired. I gave everything. I remember reading some comments. It was like, my grandma has better cardio than you. And I didn't, like, I thought it was quite funny because I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure she does.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and it was right after that fight that because of COVID and all the crazy things that was happening, like I was like, I'm in Brazil, and they weren't able to like pay off the government to just go ahead with this UFC fight, this UFC event. Like there was no crowd, there was no nothing. So, I go, and like I'm talking to Dan, and I was on the fence about whether I would go or not with him, and I was just like, I want to go with you. I want to see you, because if not, I don't know when the next time I'm going to see you is. So I flew back with him, and then pandemic started. Maybe like a few days after we landed. And it went from, like Dan was this guy that I really admire, that I'd seen a few times here and there, and I was absolutely crazy about him. So then we're like stuck in his house. and yeah, I was just like, wow, I really just got on a plane and flew, and now I'm just living with him, like I felt a little bit like, oh, does he even want me here like that? What is this? Did I just say like, this is my house now, But I remember I wanted to start training. I was just like, I can do this. And Dan was like, my goodness, because he knew like in detail everything that like I'd gone to. So he was just like, stop. So whenever he went to Fight Island, because we had a gym at home, I would start training crazy, and my head would pound, and I would be like in bed for 4 days. Jesus. And it just didn't stop. And then I got injections and a whole bunch of things. But then it started to get better. Once I got off the injections, once I got off the painkillers, once I got off all those, it started to get better once I took a break.
So were you taking a break knowing that you would come back, or did you think, I'm retired, I'm done, I can't ever fight again because of what's going on?
No, I didn't really think about my MMA career at all, because all I thought about was I wake up with a migraine, and I go to sleep with a migraine, and I don't really like this life right now. I didn't care. For me, it wasn't about being retired. It wasn't about the UFC. It wasn't about anything. It was the fact that I couldn't have a normal life. Like I'd wake up in so much pain. Like I would just stare at a wall and cry. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm going to post on social media for my, like my fans, or I didn't care. I had problems, like real problems that doctors weren't giving me solutions for.
But did you not get scared of coming back then? Because you're like, in my head, I just think if wrestling and all that stuff has done that to you,
yeah,
then the last thing I think a lot of people would choose to do is go back to the thing that caused the problem initially. So did you ever think, no, I don't want to, or were you always like, no, I love this too much, I have to do this with my life?
I mean, I do love it, but I kind of also put all my eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
I was like,
what else are you gonna do? Just gonna have to live with these headaches every day.
Like ibuprofen, where you at? But no, I had this long. There was a period where I had no headaches before I even started to train again. So I was very lucky that I now had, I had Dan who he was somebody. I'm like, what are you going to say to Dan Hardy? How can he tell you something knowing that he's doing it for your best benefit, and you're going to argue with it? like under what right are you going to like argue with that? he has all this knowledge. Listen,
Yeah.
listen, because it hasn't worked. Listen. So I did, I watched a lot of fights. I started commentating. I was stable, and I was training because I loved it and not because I had to, not because I had to get it done. And I started to learn so much that I didn't know. And that I feel is where things really changed the most, because then the thought of fighting seemed exciting to me, not like this daunting thing like, oh, if I lose, people are going to think I'm more of a loser. It was, I want to do this because I want to share this experience with Dan. I want to, like be coached by him. I want for him to like teach me things. I want us to, to share ideas off each other. It was this great bond that this allowed me to have. And it gave me it's like a whole different, like a rebirth of my love for martial arts. So yeah, I mean, it was a little bit scary. I think I had a few hard sparring sessions, and I remember I was at GB Top Team. And I remember I went into sparring, and it was like first time sparring in like 3 years, and I got kicked in the head pretty hard. But like her name was like Chanel. She's amazing, amazing fighter. She's gonna be massive in MMA, and I remember getting kicked in the head like really hard, and just being there for a second, like trying to see if I had a headache. I was like, oh, I'm okay. Oh, I'm fine. I've done all this work to get me to a place where I am fine and I can take it. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I was like, no, everything's cool. And they haven't come back. So
Great.
And this was leading up to a fantastic night. You finally got to fight in the O2. And
with Dan Hardy.
And with Dan Hardy. What? I mean, we'll get on to the post-fight moment. But we always like to ask fighters about their kind of routine when they're in that sort of room getting ready to walk out into an arena. And the fact that your first experience was you was walking out to fight in MMA and you'd never been to an MMA event, and you was just going, oh, what's going on here? You'd never even experienced it. Fast forward now to your backstage, at the O2, getting ready to walk out into, Blake and I were there, and it was a wonderful, wonderful moment. What's your routine now when you're in that room ready to go?
Well, I feel like in the O2, I found a routine. During this camp, I was training with Jack Young and his brother, and they're very systematic about the way they drill. And because we've been doing those drills so often, that when I got there, so when I got to the O2, there was a lot of traffic to get there. They moved the fights 30 minutes earlier. It was a mess. I was just checking the time. Like, I'm not going to have time to warm up or wrap my hands or do anything. As soon as we get there, the drug testing is like, well, we have to do a whole exam. And it's not just, you pee in the cup and that's it. You pee in the cup, you fill out where you live, you fill out what you've taken, you fill out, like all this information that you have to fill out. Well, I have to warm up. I'm just like, you do not have, so I started freaking out. I'm like, do you not have another time to test me? And then I'm like, dude, calm down. This is when you get too, when you get too crazy and then you do things that you shouldn't do in the fight. Calm down. So I changed. I did the test. I was looking at my watch and I was like, oh, this is not good.
Do you mind me asking, Veronica, how long that sort of test takes when you arrive on fight day? Like how long something like that is?
Yeah, it always depends. Like if you have to go to the bathroom, it can be quite quick, but quite quick is always at least 30 minutes.
Right.
Because you have to, you get a choice of cups. So they put out the cups and then you have to choose the cup. And then they put out a bunch of like little boxes. Choose the boxes. Open it this way. Put the trash here. Open it this way. Take out the red thing. And I'm like, I've been tested over and over again. I don't even look like I take supplements. Like, go test somebody else. Leave me alone. Or test. I
like the idea of lots of little bottles to choose from. Like, oh, how much am I going to do today? This is going to be a big bowl, a little bowl. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, they're all the same, but I think it's more so you don't feel like they're giving you a shady cup or something, or shady test, because it's like you chose it. And then you have to fill it out, and then they go like, okay, let's review. And I'm just like, I have to warm up.
You know.
Yeah, so I did end up finding, you know, a routine, thanks to Jack Young, that helped me with that. Like, he kind of made it, and it I started, and the moves weren't coming out that good. But it wasn't until like 10 minutes in, when I started to get more warmed up, that I felt relaxed then. Everything calmed down, because it's the same moves that I've been doing over and over and over and over again. And even if I didn't use those moves, they were still a good warm up. And before, it was always different in the warm up area, because I was always coming from a different country to train. That I was training in a different country. I was doing a different camp. I had, you know, everything was different every time. So I didn't know what should my warm up be? Should it be quick? Should it be long? I've seen some people warm up, man, that like they did a whole marathon before they walk out. I'm just like, I wouldn't be able to fight after that. So yeah, I think I found I was able to see the difference that having the right people around you makes.
Yeah.
And with that, everything changed.
Well, you had a phenomenal performance. I mean, you fought a woman in Juliana Miller that I think had just come off winning the Ultimate Fighter. You were a big underdog in that fight. And the scenes afterwards as well were absolutely fantastic. With you in Dan's arms, everyone like cheering. It was absolutely brilliant. It was kind of like one of those kind of Rocky moments where the underdog had done it. 3 years out of the octagon, you came back and put in that performance, which was absolutely incredible. I looked at your Instagram as well, and I think you said something like, Dan looks happier here than he did on our wedding day. Do you want that?
No, you really did.
But it was great. It was absolutely phenomenal scenes. What were the emotions like when you were like 3 years out, come back in a fight that a lot of people were saying, you know, that you didn't really have much of a chance. Juliana Miller was the one that the UFC were kind of touting to do well or whatever.
Yeah,
How
of course.
much did it mean for you to win that at the end?
I think it wasn't just the 3 years off, right? It was the losses. It was the being lost from country to country. It was the trying to find a home, trying to just all this feeling of lostness. To then, I remember before the fight, I told Dan, and he told me this was a bit sad, but I was just like, I have never felt so much love going into a fight, and I felt it like from his family. Sorry.
Oh,
like
no,
so
okay.
so much love, and my sisters as well. And like, I wasn't competing out of this, I don't know, this fire under me. I was competing because I loved it. And I remembered that win or lose, the people around me, they love me. Like, I wasn't this piece of shit person if I didn't win. This is sport. It's a sport. And then he saw, like, day in, day out, how to go from where I was to fighting again. Just that within itself was pretty big. It was pretty big because I was really bad. And it was all thanks to him.
That's amazing. I feel like I want to give you a minute. I almost want to give you like a virtual hug at the moment, but I can't. That's what an amazing thing, though, to know you have that love and that support going forward now for every fight that you have, and outside of the cage as well, whatever you do. So if you've got those people in your life, it must make every day easier when you're doing. I mean, because I am so in awe of the people that do MMA, that do the sport that you do. I just think the mental side of it, the physical side of it. I mean, Jesus, I just go to the gym and hit pads and I'm like, oh God, that's a bit sore, isn't it? Like to do like the wrestling and everything. And then the weight cuts, the sacrifice of weight cuts, when fighters like yourself just go through so much just to even get in to the cage to fight before the fight's even happened, and you've got potentially millions of eyes looking at you, and the danger of an elite level athlete standing opposite you in the cage. Before you even get there, there's so much to go through and so much to sacrifice. To have that, as you said, that family, that love and support around you now, you must feel like you can take on the world.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Not that I can take on, but like I have the right people around me to do it if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if anything happens, I know I have them, and then that's kind of what matters, isn't it? That's really, and I didn't really have that, so I didn't realize that was what mattered. I just had martial arts from country to country. Like, so if that didn't go good, my whole world fell apart, because that was my whole world, and it wasn't a sport that I was doing. And to put myself in that position, sometimes you think if you like, necessity brings great inventions, right? But sometimes it isn't that. It isn't. Sometimes it breaks you. Sometimes you feel like you can't catch a break. And to have that support system, to have my family, like I really reconnected with my family, with my sisters especially. I did a lot for that, and with his family too. They're just my family now, and to have that and be able to go and do the thing that I love, that just made the world of a difference. And that makes me, that's the love I had for it when I was a kid, before I went through all of what I went through because of it. And I found that again, but better.
That's
wonderful.
Amazing.
Absolutely wonderful. We're going to throw a ridiculous question in there, because we always want to ask fighters as well, once they've got that win, everything's done, the weight cut's over, and they want to have a treat. What do you eat?
What I eat? Well, I was looking for arepas, which is it's like a Spanish breakfast, and it's I love it with shredded beef and cheese, and this is like special white hand cheese, they call it, and I love it. It's, if you guys can look it up and have it, I'm sure they'll have some around. It's amazing. So I went and had that, but it wasn't until the next day, because everything was closed. But yeah, I think the greatest thing was when we got back, because I don't know why. Usually they have a green room after the fight and you chill for a bit and then they send you back. But they were sending us back right away after interviews. And because I had gone with Dan to Cage Warrior so many times, we stayed in the same hotel. Like, this was a hotel I was used to. So I remember it was after one event, like a year or so back, that we were standing looking across at the O2, and we were just talking about fights, and it was really late at night. It was probably like 2 a.m. We were just talking about moves and stuff, and to go there from the arena, we went straight back to that spot, and it was like, look at where we are now. That for me was better than any tree. Better than anything. It was special.
I can't imagine Dan talking about anything other than fighting. just every time, just like Dan's just talking about fight. He could just talk about it in so many ways. Like, you watch the breakdowns, he just so, as you've said, so knowledgeable about the whole sport. That, like, if he started talking about, like, I don't know, like football or interior decorating, I'd be like, oh, hang on a minute, that's not the Dan Hardy I know. What's going on? Are there any moments, like the dynamic between husband, wife, and coach fighter? In my head, I envisage moments where that's tricky, because I mean, I wrote my wife wrote a short film years ago that I directed, and there was moments where, like, before we got there, I was kind of sort of giving notes on the scripts, and it's not easy to say, oh, I don't think this line's very good, or I don't think the arc of this is really good. There's got to be, are there moments where you're kind of like, oh, I wish I could talk to Dan in a kind of just a husband capacity now, and then moan about my boss at work, but I can't, because you are my boss at work.
Yeah, it's a little bit like tricky. It was tricky more during the beginning where I was having a lot of like headaches and stuff, and his life is MMA, so I didn't want to know anything about it. Although I was trying to train and stuff, it was like an ebb and flow, and I was just like, I hate this. I hate martial arts. I don't even want to think about it ever again. But that wasn't true. I was just really, I was really hurt by everything. But I think what has helped is the fact that I've like lost so much. So what am I gonna say if he tells me throw the punch this way? What foot am I gonna stand on where I'd be like, no, it's not gonna be that way. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think and I have so much, I have so much respect and admiration for him because I live with him. I'm able to see not the Instagram version of Dan Hardy. I'm able to see the he wakes up at 7 a.m. and he starts watching fights. And he starts analyzing and he starts breaking them down and he does this, And I felt like he had so much work to do for himself. And he was, like it's not like he was getting paid to go coach me or it was financially beneficial for him at all. He was driving me around as well because I still don't have a driver's license in the UK. Plus, it's driving on the wrong side of the road.
the right side of the road, I think the correct side of the road.
So yeah, like he was taking me to train. Like it takes up so much of his time for him to do that. Anything that he said, I was grateful for his time there. Although I know he's my husband and all this. He's my husband. He didn't sign up to be my coach. He signed up to be my husband. So I was very grateful of the time that he would, because he still had to go back and do all that work anyway.
Yeah.
So anything that he shared with me, if he told me something, sometimes he's very organized when it comes to training, and I'm more used to like chucking things in the bag and not really checking and like by memory thinking, no, I chucked it in and then I forgot. So a few times I forgot like wraps or something. And those were the arguments that we had. Like, you have to be prepared. So yeah, those were the only moments that not technical wise, but just like, why did you bring this extra pair of whatever or something to training? Why are you not prepared? So
You've not
yeah,
packed
I just wanted
properly. You need to pack better. That's the problem.
But if you see him pack, like it takes him forever. And he packs for like where are you going? Like, you're not going for a year. You're going for like 2 weeks. Why you pack so much?
It's all coming out now, and you don't just look like that overnight, do you? He's got the hair products. He's probably got beard oils going on, hasn't he? It's all coming out now. All Dan's secrets. Loads of wardrobe changes. He's like Katy Perry at the VMA Awards, isn't he? It's just like wardrobe changes all the time.
God, he can be, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. He has so much clothes. So much clothes.
Love it.
There's like the other day he wore a shirt. I'm like, I've never seen that before. It's like, yeah, I have it in my closet. Never seen it before. We live together. Yeah, he has a lot of clothes. But that was the only thing that I guess he kind of argued with me about, was not being prepared to a training session. Well, but I knew it was for my benefit anyway. So
yeah. It's so wonderful to see how that almost sort of nomadic lifestyle that you was living as I know you're in America now and you've just flown out there and I'm sure you'll be coming back soon, but in regards to sort of training camps and things like that, to hear that you're so grounded now and having Dan in your corner and Dan in your life, it just seems like you're in a fantastic place, and to see that come to fruition at the O2 as well was a really magical moment. And so what's next?
Well, I'm hoping to fight in Paris, September 2nd. Nice. Yes, especially throughout the pandemic, I go every 6 weeks. I went to Paris for commentary, and I started there, and I've trained at MMA Factory, and I worked at the UFC event last year when they went to Paris. But I worked like interview stuff in Spanish. So to go from there to fighting, I think that would be pretty special. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Stu and I have been talking about potentially getting over there for a Paris card as well. So let's hope we're all there. We'll be cheering you on as you hopefully go out and get another win. We've had you on for longer than we thought we would. We're sorry we've taken up so much of your time.
No,
Veronica,
sorry, I rambled so much. Oh my goodness.
No, not at all. No, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've really enjoyed having you on. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Veronica. We're going to press stop, but don't go anywhere.